You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy.
Paul, over the last couple of weeks, we have spoken to Peter Tobin and other political parties, the mainstream and who are elected and all in the Dáil, and then Peter Tobin. And we're going on to the smaller parties and other different parties who may not get the airtime on radio or in the print media as well. So this week we are talking to Hermann Kelly. So Paul, tell us a bit about your intro.
Yeah, Hermann is from Derry, like yourself, Roisin, up north. Hermann, he studied marine biology originally, and subsequently went on to work in journalism. He has written for newspapers like the Irish Independent. He was editor of the Irish Catholic, and he is now working in Brussels in the European Parliament, where he has worked for a number of different MEPs. In 2018, himself and a number of other people established the Irish Freedom Party, whose policies revolve around Ireland, what is Ireland's place in the European Union, and questioning our whole immigration strategy as well here in Ireland. Hermann, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Very kind of you. Yeah, as I said, proud Derry man, like Roisin there. I'm very pleased I don't have to stand on the terraces like those people from Ross Trevor shouting up, down, up, down. I would find that quite embarrassing. And I used to edit the Irish Catholic, and I wrote more for the Irish Examiner and Irish Mail on Sunday. I wrote for a few McGill magazine, things like that.
So Hermann, you studied marine biology, you worked a bit as a secondary school teacher, you worked as a journalist. How did you get involved in politics?
Well, actually, it's because where I'm from. I grew up in the Bogside in Derry during the height of the Troubles. Obviously, like between our house and the neighbour's house was actually the barricade for Free Derry. I think it was Operation Motorman. I think it was removed in 1972 before I became conscious of it. But anyway, the area and the time was intensely political. We were all interested in politics. We all had a great knowledge of history, and we all considered things like what is a nation, the importance of national democracy, what do we want to achieve, democratic self-determination for the Irish people. All these things were very important, as well as questions such as faith, as culture, politics, economics, the interplay between economics and politics. All these things were actually generally very important. They were discussed. And I had that interest, I had that experience in life. And from that, I had at school in St. Colum's College in Derry, I had some excellent English teachers. P.D. Mullen was one of them, and he really engendered a love of the English language. Studied Irish as well, and went to Irish college. But I had a great love, I was left with this great love of English. And even though I stopped studying English at 16, I went on and read a lot of short stories and poetry, and just kept on reading vociferously. And you put those two things together, an interest in a topic, a very living interest in a topic of politics, and a love and an ability in English, and you end up with someone who's a journalist or a press officer. And that's where I ended up. And finally, I ended up working for, as you said, different MEPs. Currently work for a Romanian conservative MEP, Christian Therese, who became Mr. Anti-Lockdown during the COVID era. And before that, I was press officer for the Eurosceptic group and the European Parliament. And the president of that group was a well-known British MEP called Nigel Farage, who is still a great friend.
Yes, well, I have a question. Sorry, Paul. I have a question then, Hermann. How does a Derry man from the bog, living in Dundalk, end up working with Nigel Farage?
It was actually, I was recommended to Nigel Farage by Declan Ganley of Libertas. I was press officer for 2 months for Libertas during the European election of 2009. And when Nigel, he had seen an article that I had done previously, which was in the Irish Mail on Sunday, which made an argument that Ireland for economic recovery, we had to leave the euro currency and take back control of our own interest rates and money supply. He saw that article and he rang up Declan Ganley, asking who Ganley would recommend as a press officer in Ireland. I was recommended. I worked for 3 months for the Eurosceptic group in Ireland during the Lisbon II referendum. I think it was 2010. And from that, I was then asked to come and work for the group full-time in Brussels. And I ended up doing that for 10 years, which for me was very enjoyable, very satisfying, because I am an Irish nationalist. I believe Irish people are good enough, more than good enough, to make their own laws, control their own destiny. Therefore, I'm Eurosceptic. And to be press officer for the Eurosceptic group in Brussels was a great privilege, and I worked hard. I think we got a result, and the UKIP party, which is one of the 7 parties in the group, forced a referendum in Britain and finally got a result during the Brexit referendum. So I was very satisfied with my input into that achievement.
So here's a daring man.
And that's how I got, on the Northern Ireland issue. Nigel Farage is a British unionist. I'm an Irish nationalist. On the Northern Ireland, we had to agree to disagree, but we did have something in common, which was the acknowledgement that politics doesn't always have to do with logic. Sometimes it has to do with identity, because he would have that view because he's British. I would have an opposing view because I'm Irish. And sometimes, let's say, decisions in politics are arrived at not because of some logical argument, but because of, well, I'm Irish and therefore I want a united Ireland, something like that. So, yeah, we had to park the Northern Ireland issue at the door. But I was very clear from day one that this is who I am, this is where I'm from, and this is what I believe. And I think he had respect for that. He's a clear speaker himself. And I knew what I was getting mixed up with, and he respected me for who I was and where I'm from. So we got on very well. I was never asked or anything to wear some poppy at any stage or anything like that. I was respected for who I was, so I was very happy. I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed the company of a lot of people I work with, and I think we achieved something of global significance in the Brexit vote, because I believe it could be the beginning of the start of the unraveling of this unnecessary political union. We were in a political union before. It was called the British Empire. Irish MPs made up 16% of the vote in Westminster. Now we're in a political union based in Brussels, where we make up 1% of the population of the EU, and we have less than 1% of the votes in the Council of Ministers. So I think we're getting a bum deal, and that we're more than good enough to make our own laws.
So
Sorry.
Go ahead, Paul.
And in 2018, yourself and others, you established the Irish Freedom Party. I suppose, what would be your core objectives?
The two main things, I think, would be personal freedom and national sovereignty. Things that happened in the last number of years really called into question basic fundamental human rights. As we saw during the lockdown, the right to travel, to work, to see your family, even to enunciate your view in the national media, where there was huge censorship. So these things, so we've made a big issue. We've had rallies about various things, parental rights and education, about free speech, our first rally was about the UN Migration Pact. So we believe in national sovereignty, the ability of the Irish people to make their own laws, control their own borders, control their own budgets. The energy policy would be very different, that we believe that, for instance, that climate change has always happened and will continue to always happen. But we don't believe in climate alarmism. We don't believe the world is going to end in 12 years' time, and that we need to get sustainable and secure sources of energy, and that means looking at both tidal energy and nuclear energy as well to secure energy into the future for Ireland. So we do have, let's say, not a we're not going to be like Sinn Féin. We're not going to be like Fine Gael. We believe in basic fundamental rights of people to speak, to travel. We want the right to be able to control our own laws and decide our own destiny. And for that, yeah, we're a bit unusual in the Irish political spectrum at the minute. But only a few decades ago, be it in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, what we advocate was accepted and by all the political parties in Ireland. And now it's unusual, but hey, only a short time ago, it was completely normal. And look at this thing about, for example, the imposition of this, I believe, is dangerous trans ideology on the population. Like I studied, you pointed out, Paul, I studied marine biology at university. I know as a biological fact that only men have penises, only women can get pregnant and have children. There are basic biological differences between a man and a woman. A man cannot become a woman and vice versa. They're complementary, but they're not interchangeable. So the imposition of this trans ideology, for example, the practical consequences of, for example, putting men who are sometimes convicted rapists in women's prisons, I believe is horrendous. And indoctrinating children that they would, and their parents would allow these children to be mutilated, the genitals mutilated, is just not on. So we would be, I think we would stand up for biology rather than trans ideology. So in that way, it would be more a kind of strong natural law basis based on biology rather than some kind of passing ideology, which we believe is dangerous. So in that thing that on so many matters, be it energy policy, free speech, our reaction to the trans ideology, we would stick out like a sore thumb in the Irish political spectrum at the minute, but we're very proud of it.
And on Ireland's place in the European Union, your party would advocate that we would follow the UK and leave. Absolutely.
We would advocate that. We believe that Irish people are good enough to make our own laws, decide our own destiny, that for Ireland, for this to happen, that national democracy and EU membership are incompatible. We believe that we can't afford the European Union anymore. Our net membership fee in 2021 was 1.1 billion euro. It's cost us a fortune they've taken a fortune, 215 billions worth of fish out of our water since we joined. They imposed 64 billion bank debt on the Irish taxpayer. It's cost us a fortune. In net financial terms, we are a huge loser. And in democratic terms, look, we're 1% of the population of the EU. On so many occasions, they can impose laws upon us against our will, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's called qualified majority voting here in the EU. We believe that it's disrespectful to our right to make our own laws, and we want out of the European Union so Ireland can decide have bilateral trade agreements around the world and not be caught in what we believe is a political union which is dying democratically and demographically. When we joined the EU in 1973, the EU made up a third of the world's GDP. It currently makes 15% of the world's GDP, and by 2050, it will only be 10%. So the EU is contracting, becoming less important in global terms, and we believe that there's a big world out there, and we should be getting involved. Like, for example, at the moment, we export 32% of all Irish exports to the US, and we export 38% of all Irish exports to the EU for 6% difference, which is very small. But we don't have a trade agreement with the United States. We're not in a political union with the United States. We don't have to pay them €1 billion a year, and we don't have open borders and free movement with the United States. So we believe that we can trade and we can act as an independent state. The vast majority of countries in this world outside the EU are sovereign independent states. And I believe that that is the status that Ireland should have, just like a normal self-governing state. That's all we want. It's not radical. It's completely normal.
And if you look at the number of opinion polls on Ireland's place in the European Union, you will find that there is a high percentage of people that are saying they're happy to be part of the European Union. But would you feel that Euroscepticism and the type of Euroscepticism that you'd be talking about is underreported?
Well, you'll find that those polls are normally done by the European movement. So push polls, it's like McDonald's asking about what do you think of burgers. On 2 occasions, I was involved in both. And in the treaty of, there was 2 votes on Nice 1. And there's also a vote on the Lisbon Treaty. And in both occasions, the Irish population rejected both these EU treaties. So I think when it comes to crunch, that people are asked a question: what do you want to cede more power to the European Union? The answer on 2 occasions in this millennium has been no. So I believe when people are confronted with a very straight question on the European Union, they're much more Eurosceptic than is portrayed by RTE. RTE, I believe, are a disgrace as a national broadcaster in that there is very little variation. They talk about diversity. Diversity is wonderful, yes, but there's very little diversity of thought and diversity of opinion in Montrose, where the opinions that predominate in South Dublin predominate on our national airwaves. And the RTE allows next to no debate, open debate on very pivotal matters, like some we've touched on there, and certainly national democracy and our membership of the EU is a matter which never comes up for discussion in RTE.
So would you say then, would you be in the same line of thought that there's a lot of censorship now within our media, especially in the last 3 years?
I believe it comes from, or it was affected by both Brexit and Trump victory in 2016, where certainly big tech and left-wing governments decided, you know what, the people out there, they're really having too much freedom themselves. They're exchanging their views and their opinions with their friends and their family, and they're impacting on political life, which we don't like. It hurts us. So we need to censor. And there was a huge campaign of tech censorship by Twitter, by Facebook, by Google, etc. Now, in the last number of years, it has increased and it's moved more into the political sphere, where various countries, Ireland has now introduced anti-free speech laws, which is a mechanism by which the political elite of Ireland, they take it upon themselves that they have the right to decide which identity groups have certain privileges over everybody else. Until a few years ago, all citizens were equal before the law. Now, this anti-free speech legislation makes various identity groups, introduces an inequality, and certain groups chosen by the government have privileges over the majority. And I believe that this is not right, and that all people should be able to voice their opinions irrespective, like this idea that, oh, he hurt my feelings, I don't like what he said, and because I'm, I don't know, a one-legged lesbian from Ballyhonus, that I shouldn't feel this way and that he shouldn't be allowed to say that. Everybody should be allowed to say what they believe. Open debate is very important because it not only produces friction, it also produces a bit of light. And when you think about it, let me give you one example. There was a case, must be about 15 years ago, where a nun, Nora Wall, was convicted of rape of a girl in Galway. She was convicted, she was waiting for sentencing. And one man, a journalist, Kevin Myers, was approached by a guy who gave him evidence about the case that what was alleged against this already convicted nun could not have happened. That one person wrote an article in the Irish Times introducing the evidence that he had, and the woman, the innocent woman, was immediately released from jail. It took one person who had the ability and freedom of speech to change someone from incarceration to freedom. So it's very freedom of speech and open debate is very, very important. And yeah, it's very important that we get away from this groupthink, this dampening groupthink that we often have in Ireland. We all move like some group of bison on the prairie. But it's okay for people to stand alone or stand in smaller groups, and they have rights, they have an opinion, and to voice their opinion in the public sphere, because public debate is very important. And with censorship by the media, I think it is doing damage to our country. It's shortchanging the public, who should be open or should be exposed to a range of political views. And as I gave there an example, the lockdown, if there had been more debate, open debate, and more scientists and doctors were allowed to counter some of it was almost like living in a communist country, where all of a sudden, without any debate, only one opinion was allowed and everybody else was censored. I believe that was very dangerous. And of course, it's coming out more now every day that, for example, the lockdown was counterproductive. Sweden, actually, with no lockdown, did better than other countries. And that the idea of mandatory vaccination was actually, I find, repugnant, because what freedom do you have when the state has the power to dictate to you what you must take inside your body? I believe that that is a direct attack on our fundamental rights as individuals, and that it should never, ever be allowed. And anyway, we find now that the two countries with the lowest vaccination rate, Romania and Bulgaria, also have, in December just passed, had the lowest excess mortality from the vaccination regime. So debate, open debate, and no censorship is very, very important. So that's why free speech is a value which we hold very highly.
And it's also, as you mentioned earlier on in the interview, Hermann, is about, we were talking about the gender identity and about the definition of a woman. You know, it's become now, you don't say he or she now, you say a person. And even at that definition of a woman, politicians cannot even identify what a woman is.
Well, you know what, you've given me the first opportunity to say it publicly, that a woman is an adult female, human adult female. I studied marine biology at university. That's why I know this gender theory and trans ideology is absolute dangerous nonsense. Only a man can father and have children. A man has a penis, a woman has a vagina. Men and women are complementary. They are not the same. They are not interchangeable. I think it's highly dangerous that convicted male rapists who self-identify today as women are allowed into women's prisons, women's refuges, women's sports. It's dangerous as unfair. Of course, women have been brutalized, raped, beaten up in sport, their skulls cracked by grown men. It's very, very unfair on children. Like this, imposing this ideology, which indoctrinates children and encourages them to mutilate their bodies and bring them into lifelong sterility, I believe is completely gross and dangerous. And that's why from the beginning of the formation of the party, and it was a very lonely station to oppose this gender ideology. But we can see in polls now more and more each month that the more people learn about the consequences of this dangerous trans ideology, the more are against it. And I'm glad to see that it's now becoming a more mainstream view. And I was very pleased to see the Posey Parker up in Belfast there during the week. Actually, there was members of our party were there. And the anti-trans, like standing up for biology, is coming back into vogue again. and more people are speaking up against this dangerous gender ideology. And actually it goes on to gender theory as well, where in schools, there's some very, very dodgy material, over-sexualized material. And I believe some of it's absolutely perverse about introducing perverse sexual practices to young children of, like, for instance, 12 years of age and 9 years of age in school is basically not on. And it's not only to do with the damage that it does to children, it's also it's parents who should have the right to decide what is taught to the children, not the big state, not the schools, not the churches, but the parents who should have that right. And this imposition being pushed in by very well-funded, state-funded NGOs with a deep-seated and dangerous ideology, I believe more people are waking up to what's going on, and they're getting up on their hind legs and they're protesting and they're looking for change. And all these parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, Labour, etc., they're on so many issues. It's like one party state. They have one view. And I think that we are like a breath of fresh air. That we are, well, let's say, contrarian on a number of aspects of politics. We are opposed to their views. And as I say, only takes one prick to burst a balloon, and I'm willing to be that prick.
That brings me on to...
I don't know if we can broadcast that. Oh, there we go.
You talked about the indoctrination and the trans ideology in schools, and I suppose that you would also be in agreement with Jana London, the founder of Women, Child and Family Advocate, who is going around all the libraries, from highlighting what is in the books that is being sort of in the libraries, especially for young children.
And in the libraries, I've seen some of these books. It's absolutely outrageous about some of the stuff. I won't mention it here, like being taught to young children. It just is not on. It shows like that parental rights, child innocence and parental rights have been completely subverted in schools and in libraries, and parents are right to protest to those in authority to have these books removed and to have better teaching materials in our schools. I know, that members of the Irish Freedom Party will be in Drogheda tomorrow, where there's a protest about outside the local library, and people have a right to find out what exactly is being taught to my children. And the over-sexualization of children at an inappropriate age has to change, and the state has to recognize that parents do not co-parent with the state. The parents, our children are our children. They don't belong to the state. So the state has to learn its place. And just this creeping left-wing proto-communist idea of the state has to decide everything. No, like help tar the roads and look after the street lights, etc. But leave the kids alone. The parents will look after the kids.
Children are children at the end of the day, is my opinion. I'm not speaking for Paul. I know Paul would agree with this. That children's innocence should be maintained, and it's the parental control, and parents are the the state doesn't own the children. Parents are the guardians of the children.
Like the exposition of what is very close to pornography on young children is it's damaging and it's dangerous and it shouldn't happen. And it's parents who have to stand up and say, sorry, we'll decide what is taught to our children, not the Minister of Education, thanks.
Yeah.
And that goes for every parent in the country, that they decide if they want their children, what material is taught in the class, and if they're not happy, first try to get the material out of the classroom, and then take their child out of the classroom for the class that they're talking about. And if need be, take them out of the school, and if need be, homeschool them. Because if they're not happy what is being taught in a state school, take them out and until you're happy.
Okay. And Hermann, back to one of your main core objectives will be Ireland to leave the European Union. Ireland receives a significant amount of grant aid between different things, between different programs, between CAP, research and education, treatment abroad, peace and reconciliation. If we were to leave leave the European Union, how would we replace that funding, which is quite significant?
Yeah, you know what? We're dealing here with a problem in that the Irish people are not properly and fully informed about our financial relationship with the European Union. Now, it's very easy to check. It's in the Irish budget statistics of every year. It's given every year, and on table 10 of those statistics, it tells you how much we've given, how much we've received to the EU, and what is our net contribution, or how much we receive from the EU. Ireland is a net contributor to the EU budget since 2013. Last year, 22, I think, our net contribution to the EU was 1.1 billion euro. So Ireland is a net contributor. The farmers who receive money in CAP receive that overall from the Irish taxpayer. They don't receive it from Brussels. Ireland is a net contributor for almost 10 years now. So, and on top of that, in cash terms, since we joined the EU, we have received net, since we joined, 44 billion euro. However, the EU, was it 2011, imposed, or the Troika imposed this private bank debt of 64 billion on the Irish taxpayer. So we're immediately 20 billion euro down. On top of that, then the financial crisis, they also took the pension fund, which is another 20 billion. And on top of that, they took out 215 billions worth of fish out of Irish national water since we joined the EU. So we are down roughly 250 billion since we joined the EU. So when we actually have a close analysis of in cash terms, what we're looking at with the EU, it's actually not as rosy as RTE would have us. And I think that outside the European Union, we would have the ability, because at the moment, our trade policy, it's called Common Commercial Policy. It is set and decided by the European Union. Outside of that, we'd be able to decide our own trade policy, have bilateral trade agreements with countries around the world. I gave the example earlier that we are already sell a third of our goods to the United States every year, but we're not in a political union, nor do we have a massive net contribution to some US fund. So I believe we're better off outside the European Union. It's very expensive. We can't afford a membership fee anymore. And why do we pay money to old men we don't elect in Brussels to make our laws? It doesn't make sense. Didn't we fight against the British for centuries that we could have the freedom to make our own laws? I thought that's what it was about.
But if you were to look at our neighbours across the water in the UK, the referendum was in 2016 to Brexit, and it's still, there are people that would say maybe we made a mistake, because we have seen the British economy has reduced and stuff like that. So to leave the European Union wouldn't be a straightforward.
Well, I'm not
process.
sure that the British, of course, you had the COVID lockdown, etc. But it's very hard to divvy up which is a consequence of lockdown, which is a consequence of Brexit. But I believe that the British economy, contrary to what you would read in the Irish press all the time, has actually done slightly better than other European economies over the last number of years. But certainly what didn't happen was that they were told pre-Brexit, if people voted for Brexit, that the day after the referendum, there was going to be a huge recession, like virtually the sky was going to fall down, and the people would be walking around the streets penniless and in their, underpants. That certainly didn't happen, and that life went on as normal.
It was also said that there'll be an extra 350 million for the NHS every year, but has that happened? Those that were advocating to leave.
Certainly, Nigel Farage wasn't part of that campaign, which was led by the Tory party. But like a responsible government was going around with a scare campaign that the sky was going to fall in if they voted for Brexit. Well, they did vote for Brexit, and the world hasn't ground to a halt. The economy, like relative to other European economies, is doing quite well. But there is a problem, Paul. I would agree with you in this aspect, in that the Tory government that is in there, they do have the freedom to make economic decisions, but they don't have the will, and they haven't made those choices yet to take advantage of the freedoms that Brexit gave them, and that's their choice. You can't make people exercise the freedom, but they have that freedom. Have they used it? I would say no, they haven't.
On that note, a lot of people did not think that the Brexit vote would go, the people on the referendum would vote to leave Europe. It was a complete shock to the media, to politicians, and even I think Nigel Farage said it was a big shock, that so many people did vote within the UK to vote for Brexit. Yeah. What's your thoughts on if there was a referendum maybe next year or the year after? Do you think there would be a shock here for the media and the Irish government, the same as the UK?
Would it happen again? It's hard to know, but we were told pre-Brexit vote that, of course, it would never happen. People would never vote for Brexit, but they did by 52%. I think that what happened was a lot of people from the north of England, working class people from the north of England, who don't normally vote, came out in huge numbers and voted because they thought this is our opportunity for change. One of the aspects that they were cheesed off with was Britain is a massive contributor to the EU budget every year, as Ireland is now. And also they're also cheesed off about the consequences of free movement, open borders, and that the consequences for ordinary people having jobs, getting houses, etc. That was a big issue. And also I think the whole, let's say, Britain was never a colony of another country before. They were always the colonizers. And for them to experience what it was like to have laws imposed upon them was it became quite repugnant. Now, I wish the people of Ireland kind of regained that desire for freedom that the men and women of 1916 had, that Irish people would make their own laws and not have it imposed from the outside by other people. And hopefully that at some stage in the future, I'm putting up a torch now, talking about Irish self-determination, Irish democracy, Irish people are good enough. Hopefully, maybe not immediately, but that in the long term, people will see the benefit of being the master of your own house.
What is the Irish Freedom Party's thoughts on neutrality?
Oh, we're very, very strongly in favour of Irish military neutrality. Not only in favour of it, but actually taking back meaningful military neutrality. The reason why, because at the moment, it's virtually disappeared. It's been like a salami slicer has happened. Currently, we are members of NATO Partnership for Peace. We're a member of PESCO, which is a permanent military structure. And we're also members of EU battle groups. You may have seen there a few years ago, there was Irish soldiers fighting to defend French uranium deposits in Mali. Why were Irish soldiers fighting in kind of military units in Mali? That is no benefit to the people of Ireland whatsoever. And it completely compromises our military neutrality. Ireland, if we take back meaningful military neutrality, Ireland will also take back the power and the ability to be a peacemaker in this world rather than a warmonger. So if we maintain or take back military neutrality, we can be a peacemaker and be regarded across the globe as let's say, an honest broker, trying to bring two sides together rather than always being part of an alliance. Now, at the moment, the Irish government is pushing Ireland into NATO. Now, we're sending aid over to Ukraine. We're getting sending soldiers to train people over in the Ukraine. Basically, Ireland we're not in any real terms, are we any longer a military neutral country. We believe it is a value and a practice and a policy which is very important, and we will be seeking to take back meaningful military neutrality in the future. That means getting out of EU battle groups and out of NATO's Partnership for Peace, etc.
And would you invest in the Defence Forces and the Garda Síochána?
Absolutely. I know a guy, Michael Murphy, who used to be in NATO. He was an Irish Army intelligence officer. He would know in detail, and I would know people who in detail would tell me about the huge underfunding of the Irish Defence Forces for many decades. We are at basically half the level of army levels that we should have. I know that the soldiers are paid peanuts. I've met them, sergeants. They were telling me how much they were getting paid for 12-hour shifts. It was absolutely pittance. I believe one guy, it was a few years ago, was telling me he was going to get €54 for like a 12-hour shift. How can any man in the country try to support his family on 54 quid for a day's work? It's just not possible. Irish Defence Forces, that includes our Navy, which, like, actually, at the moment, no Navy boats can go to sea because we don't have the personnel. Like, so we have 4 boats, but none of them can go to sea because we don't have the personnel. It was embarrassing that there, 2 summers ago, boats had to come from some European agency because Ireland didn't have the ability to check our own waters. We have virtually no air force worth a damn. We, like 100 years after independence, we have this embarrassment that like Britain is basically providing air cover for Ireland. That's just not on. That's embarrassing. We really need to do better than we are at the moment. So I believe we have to at least double funding for Irish Defence Forces. Look, we have to have the ability to even to put up, if there's trouble, that we are able in some way to at least put up a viable defence of our country rather than relying on our next door neighbour, or even worse, having to become a member of NATO and getting involved in other people's wars. De Valera was right in the 1940s and 50s when he said it's always the big states which benefit from war, and smaller states such as Ireland would just receive the crumbs at the end of the conflict. So I don't want Irish men and women to be used as cannon fodder in foreign wars. We should keep out of their conflicts, become a neutral broker of peace rather than a warmonger. That's my attitude. But we also have to pay properly for a proper defence forces in Ireland, for sure.
To defend our country and protect our citizens.
Yes.
And I suppose going back to issues, close to home, cost of living prices, Hermann, is affecting everybody. It's biting very hard. What measures would the Irish Freedom Party do to help ease the cost of living burden that people are facing at this moment in time?
Well, in immediate terms, energy cost is a huge burden on every household in the country. Energy bills have gone up through the roof, no pun intended there. But for example, in the short term, we would reopen the 2 power stations in the Midlands that have been stupidly shut down, should never have been shut down. We would allow people to cut turf as they need around the Midlands. We would seek to immediately restarting the exploration for oil and gas off the Irish coast. We would begin to exploit the oil and gas that we have huge deposits of oil and gas around our country.
Yeah.
And long term, we had also reduced the unnecessary carbon tax imposed upon the Irish population, which makes our food and our fuel more expensive. So we would stop this silly carbon tax immediately. And long term, we would also we would seek to have an international committee to examine the safety, viability, and cost of both tidal power and nuclear power in Ireland, so that we can secure a long-term, we could have long-term energy security at a better cost. I see that Germany just shut down their last 3 nuclear power stations there during the week. If we were smart, we would jump in and say, "Here, can we buy 2 off you at bargain bucket cost?" And now we need to secure. Look, 29%, I believe, yeah, by the end of this decade, 29% of all energy will go on data centers. I believe that this is wrong. It's Irish people should be the priority of our country, not these globalist corporations which come here and who live off our deep corporation tax and get our energy at a very cheap cost. No, these data centers, another aspect is that we wouldn't be given any more planning permission for data centers. Ireland provides more than its share of energy for these data centers, and Irish people should be the priority, as I said, not these globalist corporations. One aspect, Paul, there about why we have to ask why cost of living has gone up, and one of the reasons why is inflation. Inflation is caused by excess money supply, by cheap euro interest rates. When Ireland gave up our own currency and we joined the euro, we gave up very important levers of economic control. That was our interest rates of our currency, and that was also control of money supply. We believe that only outside the euro can we act responsibly, because the euro and post the lockdown, where there was a massive splurge of government spending, also now with the post-COVID, there was a massive excess government spending. That means that there's more money chasing less goods, which has produced inflation. And inflation makes especially those who don't have much assets, like ordinary working people, those who are dependent on their wages for income rather than assets, that makes them poorer. So inflation really attacks the poor much more than the rich. And we believe it shows the importance of having our own currency and control over interest rates and money supply.
Hermann, I want to come on to housing in a little moment. But so what I hear you saying is the Irish Freedom Party are for building up trade and industry, business, small local businesses and international businesses with the export.
Yeah.
And would you say then too, so you represent the business people and the working people. So who would be your core target audience?
It would be actually, no, it wouldn't be multinational corporations. We would be looking to build up indigenous industry and small business owners, people who, through their hard work to support themselves, take the risk of setting up businesses. Now, indigenous Irish industry is less flighty. Now, there's a problem with large corporations. Like, look at Dell there a number of years ago. Dell used to employ a lot of people in Ireland. Then they got a better offer from Poland, I believe it was Poland, and they disappeared, left Ireland within a few months. So multinational corporations, they just follow wherever they will make more profits, and they have no allegiance, they have no desire, they have no need to remain. If they don't have a need to remain in Ireland, they just get up and leave overnight, and we have that massive loss of jobs. With indigenous Irish industry, they have more allegiance to the country, to the workforce. They're more likely to remain here. They'll be less flighty. And so it's indigenous Irish industry, SMEs, small businesses. That's the ones we're really looking to attract. And because our policy is that we are a smaller state, we believe in less government spending, less government waste, lower taxation, so that people can decide themselves how they spend the money, because we believe it's more inefficiently done by the government, who will often waste their money. Look at the moment where 8% of all government spending goes on NGOs, which are very often ideological and very politically orientated rather than for helping people practically. So we are in favor of lower taxation and encouraging people to go to work and start their own businesses and help other people get jobs. So it's, as I said, SMEs, small businesses, Indigenous Irish industry rather than globalist corporations. I believe that like companies like Google and Twitter and Facebook, they get far too easy an easy run out of Ireland, and that they certainly, I don't believe they even pay their basic 12.5% corporation tax, because they hide their money and their profits behind this intellectual property scams that they have in Ireland. So I believe that we've been a soft touch for too long for these globalist corporations. So on immigration and housing, we believe that Ireland, not only controlling its own laws and foreign policy, but also its own borders, and that we should have the ability to decide how many people come into the country, what qualifications, just like Australia. Australia has a points-based system where if they need carpenters, if they need engineers of a certain type, they will advertise and they will take in these people with qualifications and the number that they need for their economy. At the moment, Ireland is is basically given open borders to the rest of the world. People think it's a complete free-for-all. Now, our population since 1990, is it, has gone up by 46%. It went up from 3.5 million people to just over 5 million people there recently. That's a 46% increase in 40 years. That's absolutely colossal. And we believe that the large increase in people has led to an increase in demand for housing and for apartments. That means house prices have gone up out of reach of many normal people, and people find it extremely difficult to be able to find apartment that they can rent, never mind even afford the rent. So demand for housing and house prices and rents are very closely linked, and we cannot just talk about supply, we also have to curb demand, because only by curbing demand can we calm down the housing market and allow the people who are working people can be able to afford a house and be able to rent an apartment. Now, there is ways, and we do have in our housing policy ways to increase the housing supply and allow people to make it easier to like various means to increase housing supply. But like all of this would be absolutely useless unless the state gets a hand on curbing demand and curbing immigration, and that it's immigration which is good for the Irish people, and that we have the numbers and the quality of people coming into Ireland, which is good for Ireland. Immigration policy should be decided in what is good for the Irish people, not on people's desire to come here, because at any one time in the world, there's, I think it's 16 million people who are looking to emigrate around the world at any one time. But we just can't say anybody who wants to come to Ireland. That's ridiculous. And it also brings then the issue of increased security for ordinary people. Like in Germany, in France, in Italy, and Sweden, we can see large numbers of unvetted males coming into the country, make the country less safe, less secure. Sexual assaults have gone up, number of murders have gone up. So we just have to be realistic. We just got to take care of the people of Ireland, and we just can't have a free-for-all of unknown numbers of unvetted males in the country. It's bad for the housing market. It's also bad for national security. And we just have to be like a mature, normal state, such as Australia, which dictates how many people come in the country, what qualifications they have, and also to ascertain before they come into the country that they don't have a criminal record and they're not going to be a burden on the Irish taxpayer. And that's completely normal around the country, around the world, sorry.
And Herman, Britain introduced a fairly radical but controversial immigration policy where anyone who's come to Britain has been sent to Rwanda. And is Ireland kind of seeing a little bit of a backlash from that? People that would have thought, no, I go to the UK. Well, no, I go to Ireland. It's an English speaking country now. So are we kind of seeing the backlash from that pretty bonkers
right.
policy, that's for want of another word?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. That's exactly what is happening. Actually, I remember because I had during Nice. So in 2001, the Irish people majority of people voted against the Treaty of Nice. The people in Brussels didn't like that answer. They demanded that Ireland vote again, and their little minions in Dublin were happy to facilitate that. So there was a second vote for the Nice Treaty. That was the one to do with expansion into Eastern Europe. But one of the Irish government undertook to accept anybody from Eastern Europe immediately after the Treaty of Nice was passed. And that meant from 2004 until 2009 that 500,000 people came from Eastern Europe. The reason why is, as you pointed out there, Paul, was the funnel effect. So these people from Eastern Europe couldn't go to the rest, couldn't go to France, they couldn't go to Germany, they couldn't go to like Italy. So where did they go? They came to Britain and they came to Ireland. So our population of a huge number of immigrants came to Ireland in a very short period of time. And I believe that's what's happening now again, that people can hear about, oh, if you go to Britain, it's becoming, oh, it's more difficult. Now, where before they're being put up in hotels, now they're being put into army barracks in different places, and now there's the threat overhanging them of being sent to an army barracks somewhere in Rwanda. So yeah, they don't want to come to Britain. They don't want to go to Britain anymore. So they've heard that Ireland is a very soft touch. Roderick O'Gorman has promised in 8 languages that they're going to have their own house, or sorry, what was the own door house? I forget the exact term. But basically, that they wouldn't be in the area. They would have access to housing and apartments and free welfare, etc. And I believe that just been putting out honey and putting out cheese, you're going to attract mice and you're going to attract bees when they believe that Ireland is a soft touch and you can go there, get a free house, get free welfare. Like last year, there was 237,000 people, non-Irish people, took up PPS numbers, which is a social security number. Now, that's almost 250,000 people in 1 year, non-Irish people. That is a huge change in the demographics over a short period of time.
A large percentage of them were Ukrainians.
No, that's PPS numbers. Yeah, well, it was 70,000 people were Ukrainians. So 237,000 people were non-Irish nationals. That was only 23% of the total were actually Irish nationals. 70,000 of those were Ukrainian nationals, Paul. But I believe just that taking in that huge number of people in a short period of time causes trouble economically in regards housing and regards national security. And I believe it's ill thought out and that Ireland really needs to get, like in 2004, the only time we ever had a referendum on anything pertaining to immigration was in 2004. It was called the Anchor Baby referendum, where people were abusing a clause in the Good Friday Agreement and that they were flying in from all over the world to have a baby in Ireland, which gave the baby citizenship, and therefore the parents would then have a parental right to stay in Ireland. That was being abused. The people voted against that abuse of that by almost 80%. So that's the only time that Irish people were actually allowed a voice on a strictly an immigration issue. And I believe a lot of people are really cheesed off by what they see of the abuse of our immigration system at the minute. Look at the security threat that is open to us. You have over 60% of the people coming into Dublin Airport who are who say that they're asylum seekers. They all claim, 60% of them claim that they've lost their passport between getting on the plane and arriving in Dublin. We know that's a complete lie, and that these people are ditching their passports so that they can more easily apply for asylum, and they will not be sent back to the country of origin. I think, look, we've been taken for a ride. Ireland has to become like a normal state and have proper border controls for the safety of its people. That's all we're asking for, to be a normal state as we have all around the globe. That's all.
And if you were to estimate how many of those people that are arriving in Ireland with no passports, how many of them would you feel may possibly being trafficked?
Yeah, well, that's it's very hard to tell. There have been a number of cases where people have been obviously trafficked. Actually, that poor woman who was murdered in Limerick there, 3 weeks ago, it's very possible that she was trafficked into Ireland to be a sex worker. Yes, actually, I believe that Ireland is the second worst country in Europe for human trafficking. So it is a big issue, which is very little discussed in Ireland at the minute. And
Is Ireland and the Irish government and the media, like they did with domestic violence and violence against women, which now they've changed to gender-based violence, but violence against women, have Ireland strategy been pushing the human trafficking issue under the carpet the way they do with the child sex abuse within the Catholic Church and the modeling sisters? And I was talking to the child trafficking agencies here in Ireland. Ireland is on the same watch list as Romania and Saudi Arabia. And that says a lot. We're not doing enough with human trafficking in Ireland. Are we just like with the immigration, an open door policy?
Well, that's exactly what's happening. When like anybody who wants to come here can come here, and then they're not sent back. And like all these people coming in without passports, they're not sent back on the same plane. Off you go. That needs to start. That we have to know the criminal, like the people coming in here. Do they have something that they can contribute to our society? Do they have qualifications, which we need in Ireland?
And do they have a criminal record?
Do they have a criminal record? Like the number of cases that have come up in our courts in the last number of years about guys over in other European states who have already been convicted of rape and sexual assault, and then they get out of jail and they come from wherever, Bulgaria or Hungary. They come into Ireland and they rape and they kill someone, or more often sexual assault. They'll do it in Ireland within a few weeks of arriving. Like, that is madness. Like you wouldn't allow an open door. You don't go to bed at night and just leave the door open and anybody who wants to come in can come in. Well, you can't do that with an immigration policy for a state. Is just exactly the same. You want to know who, like, for example, you wouldn't allow, as you're sitting at home, sitting down for your dinner with your family, you wouldn't allow some stranger just to walk into the house, go up to the fridge, take out food, sit down and start feeding themselves. And for its own security and also for the economic situation, that there must be border controls in Ireland, and allowing hundreds of thousands of unvetted young males into Ireland is bad for our safety. It has very poor consequences for our country. And it's also very severe. It's very expensive for our country. This cost, like I think for Ukrainian refugees alone this year, it's going to be 1 billion. It's a huge amount of money. And especially in the other thing, taking in all these young men from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the safe countries such as Georgia and Albania, it's actually madness. It shouldn't be allowed, and we need to stop it immediately.
The whole international protection process, when if someone applies and they're initially turned down, it could be 2 to 3 years before their next application could be heard. Do you think this, having people kind of in limbo, that's not good either?
Well, you're right. It shouldn't be in limbo. The application should be speeded up to a number of weeks, the very maximum 6 months. The application should be speeded up. They have to prove that they're here as refugees, and they don't have proof. The application should be processed very, very quickly. While they're here, and it's being processed, they should remain in I believe, a secure Mosney-like type facility where they're fed and cared for and educated. But the process should speed up very quickly. And if they're found not to fulfill the conditions, they should be sent back on the plane to wherever their country of origin. But they just can't come taking advantage of a free-for-all in Irish society. We need to take back control of the numbers and the quality of the people coming into Ireland because of the security issue and the economic cost.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are instances of people who waiting for a decision for 8, 9, and even up to 15 years. That's just ridiculous. It just needs to be speeded up.
Yeah. Well, Hermann Kelly, we've gone past the top of the hour. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Hermann, and finding out about the man behind the Irish Freedom Party and your political values and everything else. I take it that the Irish Freedom Party are going to be selecting candidates to run in the local and general elections nationwide.
Yes, we've already chosen 7 so far, and we're going through more candidates at the minute as quickly as we can to get them approved. They have a 2, we say 1, 2, 3. There's 3 kind of series of interviews that they have to go through, so it's pretty extensive. So we're getting through them as quickly as we can. We have 7 so far. No, but the guy says, well, there's I think 18 in process at the moment. So we'll be looking for as many candidates as possible. And if there's anybody listening who would like to find out more about the party, it's on there, irishfreedom.ie. Go there, have a look, and see if they'd be interested in standing for local elections, etc.
And how can people find you?
It's at irishfreedom.ie online, and the Twitter is Irexit Freedom. It's also on the Facebook. Just put an Irish Freedom Party.
And we'll put in the links in the description box below.
Thank you very much, Roisin and Paul. It's been a pleasure, and I hope your listeners learn something from it.
And Hermann, maybe we'll get you on in the future on the panel discussion, talking about the various issues that is facing our citizens of Ireland.
That's very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed, Hermann Kelly.